we're bombarded with advice about bone health. Drink more milk, take calcium supplements, lift weights, do resistance training. The supplement industry alone makes billions telling us our bones need help. But here's what they don't tell you. Hunter-gatherers living 7,000 years ago had bones as strong as modern orangutans, and they didn't have any of our modern supplements or dedicated training. In 2014, researchers at the University of Cambridge made a discovery that challenged everything we thought we knew about bone strength. They were analyzing skeletal remains from archaeological sites in Illinois, specifically looking at hip bones from ancient populations. They had samples from 4 distinct groups, 2 hunter-gatherer populations and 2 agricultural populations, all from the same geographic area, all likely genetically similar. When they put these bones under CT scanners and analyzed the internal structure, they found something shocking. The hunter-gatherer bones from around 7,000 years ago had trabecular bone density comparable to orangutans. That's the spongy honeycomb-like bone structure at the ends of your bones near the joints. The farmers from the same area just 6,000 years later, their bones were 20% less dense, significantly more fragile, more prone to fractures. Now, your first thought is probably, well, of course, we're sedentary now. We sit at desks, we drive cars, we don't move like our ancestors did. But here's where it gets interesting. These weren't modern humans. These were farmers from 700 to 1,000 years ago. Medieval farmers who worked the land all day, who didn't have cars or office jobs, who were physically active by any modern standard, and their bones already weak. In fact, when researchers compared medieval farmer bones to modern bones, they found something remarkable. They were already about the same strength. The medieval period bones were comparable to what we see today. This means the major shift, the dramatic weakening of human bones, didn't happen in the last 100 years with cars and computers. It happened 12,000 years ago, when we stopped hunting and gathering, when we started farming. Let me break down exactly what the researchers found, because the details matter here. The study focused specifically on the femoral head, the ball-shaped top of your thigh bone that forms your hip joint. This is critical for bearing your body weight when you walk. When they analyzed the trabecular bone, that spongy internal structure, they found that hunter-gatherers had significantly thicker trabecular struts. The mesh-like structure inside the bone was denser, with more actual bone material relative to airspace. The researchers described it as a shift from rod-like structures to thick, plate-like structures. Everything was reinforced. Both farming groups tested had similar bone structure to each other, and both were significantly weaker than the foragers. This wasn't about one bad crop year or one particular settlement. This was a systematic difference between lifestyles. Now here's what they ruled out. Diet wasn't the factor. Both groups consumed locally available foods with adequate variety. Neither group was calcium deficient. If diet was the cause, you'd expect to see changes across all bones, arms and legs equally. But that's not what happened. Arm bone strength remained relatively constant across all populations. Only leg bones weakened dramatically. This points to one specific factor: how much you load your lower body, how much mechanical stress you put on your legs. And here's perhaps the most significant finding. When researchers looked at even older remains, hominids from around 150,000 years ago, they found bones that were stronger than the 7,000-year-old hunter-gatherers. One of the lead researchers, Colin Shaw, said, "Something is going on in the distant past to create bone strength that outguns anything in the last 10,000 years." So what were hunter-gatherers doing that created bones this strong? It wasn't some secret technique, it wasn't special exercises. It was their entire way of life. Hunter-gatherers walked constantly. Estimates suggest anywhere from 5 to 15 miles per day, tracking game, foraging for plants, moving between seasonal camps, every single day. But it wasn't just the distance, it was the terrain. Uneven ground, hills, natural obstacles, river crossings. Every step required your bones to adapt to different forces. They carried loads constantly. A successful hunt meant carrying portions of the animal back to camp. Tools, water, gathered foods, all carried on the body. And perhaps most importantly, there were no rest days, no weekends off, no "I'll start again Monday." Survival required constant movement. This created a continuous cycle of microdamage and repair. Your bones would develop tiny stress fractures, microscopic damage from the daily loading. Then your body would repair that damage by adding more bone material, making the structure stronger. The thickening of trabecular bone they observed wasn't genetic, it wasn't inherited. It was the skeleton's direct response to mechanical stress. When humans transitioned to farming, the movement patterns changed dramatically. Yes, farming is hard work, but it's repetitive. You walk the same paths, you bend and straighten in predictable patterns, you stay in one place. The varied constant loading disappeared, and the bones adapted by becoming lighter, more efficient for the new lifestyle, but also more fragile. Here's what this research reveals, and this is the part that challenges everything. One of the study authors stated it plainly. There is no anatomical reason why a person born today could not develop the skeletal strength of a prehistoric forager or a modern orangutan. Read that again. This isn't about genetics. It's not about they were built different. It's not about being from a different era. A human born in 2026 has the same potential for bone strength as a human from 7,000 years ago. The difference is entirely environmental. Modern humans, even modern athletes, don't load their bones enough to match hunter-gatherers. We have gyms, we have training programs, we have periodization and progressive overload. But we're still not creating the kind of constant, varied mechanical stress that hunter-gatherers experience daily. Another study looked at modern athletes from impact sports, people pushing their bodies far beyond the average person. They found these athletes have about 20 to 30% greater bone strength than sedentary people. Impressive, but still not at hunter-gatherer levels. Now, why does this matter? Because of what happens when you don't load your bones. Research on bed rest shows you can lose about 3% of cortical bone in your leg in just 1 month of immobility. Astronauts on a typical 120 to 180 day space mission lose over 10% of their bone strength because of the microgravity environment. Remove the loading and bones become fragile fast. But the inverse is also true. Load the bones properly and they become remarkably strong. Hip fractures, osteoporosis, age-related bone loss, these don't have to be inevitable. If you build bone strength earlier in life, it never drops below the threshold where fractures easily occur. The researchers put it this way. There's 7 million years of hominid evolution geared towards action and physical activity for survival, but it's only in the last, say, 50 to 100 years that we've been so sedentary, dangerously so. So what does this mean for us? It means we're living in what one researcher called a cultural and technological milieu, incompatible with our evolutionary adaptations. We've engineered movement out of life, online grocery delivery, electric bikes, elevators. Every innovation designed to make life easier has removed opportunities to load our bones. And children are especially affected. Research shows that bone strength gains during childhood, when bones are most responsive to stress, can be up to 5.5% over just 6 months with proper loading activities. But modern kids play outside less, jump less, climb less. Some researchers even suggest that epigenetic memories could pass down several generations, meaning our sedentary lifestyle today might influence gene expression in our children and grandchildren. Here's what actually works, based on this research. Loading patterns matter more than calcium intake. Once you have adequate calcium, more doesn't help. What matters is mechanical stress. Walking with weight, uneven terrain instead of treadmills, impact activities that create bone stress, varied movement patterns that force bones to adapt in multiple directions. It's not about finding the perfect exercise program. It's about reintroducing the kind of movement humans did for millions of years and abandoned just 12,000 years ago. Ancient hunter-gatherers didn't understand trabecular bone density. They didn't know about osteoblasts or Wolff's law of bone remodeling. They had no concept of skeletal biomechanics, but they lived in a way that made their bones nearly unbreakable. They moved constantly over varied terrain, carrying loads, creating the exact mechanical stresses that bones need to become strong. We have all the knowledge, we understand the cellular mechanisms, we can measure bone density down to the millimeter, but we're missing the one thing that actually mattered: movement that challenges the bones, every single day. The hunter-gatherers knew something about bone strength we didn't. They just didn't know they knew it.